Hello everyone, this is Harrison Young for Topic Time. Before we begin the show, we have 10 underwriters, some old ones, some new ones, and I'm going to read the names and then we'll get started. We have Bridgewater Liquors in Bridgewater. We have Town Line General Store in West Bridgewater, where UPS access is always available. We have a new car dealership, SKS Auto Sales in Bridgewater on the Middleborough line. It's like a zoo for cars and it just opened. We have Made Pro Cleaning Service with Glacio Carvalho as president in East Bridgewater. We have Michael H. Jewelers in East Bridgewater. We have Auto Country in Abington, Michael Fagan president. We have my old pal George Millette with Hawkeye Fence in Brockton. We have Shore Shine Professional Detailing and Hand Wash for Cars in Abington. We have Furnace Brook Motors in Easton, Gary Stone, the general manager. And we have Pizza Time Restaurant in Norton, managed and owned, actually, I believe, by David Garfinkel, who's an old friend of mine, and my brothers. So that having been said, thank you all very much. And now we will start Topic Time for today. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first September edition of Topic Time with Harrison Young. It is Monday, September the 10th. It's a kind of an overcast day. We needed the rain. We got it. That's fine. But as usual, the guests just keep getting like incredible. They're always incredible, but I'm finding out more people with more incredible stories to tell. And the gentleman I have here today, he didn't just have an incredible story to tell, he wrote an incredible story. Now, I know all of you are familiar with an iconic musician named Benjamin Orr, who was one of the co-founders of Boston's own band, The Cars. Well, this gentleman here has painstakingly spent 10 years of his life writing Ben Orr's biography, and the book is called Let's Go. It is going to be available for reading on officially November 11th of 2018. The orders are already being placed. He told me already that they have like 400 orders already. Books have been pre-ordered as of now, and this is just the beginning. He just signed on yesterday to start taking orders, and I know I'm going to get my copy. And we're going to talk to him today. We're going to talk about his writing of the book, about Benjamin Orr's life as we know it. We're not going to give too much away, and about his history too as a writer, because he himself is a music beat writer. He was also interviewed at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame down in Cleveland by their Fox News affiliate upon Ben Orr's induction into the Hall of Fame. He did a great job, and so did Fox News interviewing him. So Joe Milliken, how are you? Thank you for coming in Topic Time and being on my show today. All the way down from Bellows Falls, Vermont, did he drive to be on Topic Time?
Harrison, it's a privilege to be here. I really appreciate it.
Did you like the intro I just gave you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful intro.
Thank you very much. Thank you, yeah. Okay, well now here's the thing. As you know, you've seen some of my interviews before, and what I tend to do with guests is, I interview them like I ask them questions about what life was like for them growing up and how they got to be where they are. Now, obviously, Ben passed away a while back, so he couldn't be here today. But I'm going to take all the information that you've compiled, and I'm going to like vicariously interview Ben through you. So what I'm going to say to you is this. I'm going to say, well, tell me about Ben as a young guy, as a kid, And I found out, and I didn't even know this. I do my research when I have guests on, and I saw that he grew up in Cleveland, and I didn't even know that until I saw your interview on Fox News down there on YouTube with the Fox News people at the Hall of Fame. So tell me about Ben growing up in Cleveland, how he got into music, and then eventually his migration to meet Rick Ocasek, the other co-founder of the Cars, and how that came to be. And if I have any more questions, I'll interject. So go ahead, in your own words, please, if you would.
Well, as you mentioned, Ben is originally from Cleveland.
Okay.
And he knew he wanted to be an entertainer from a very early age.
Okay, hold up a second. When you say entertainer, do you mean musical entertainer or just entertainer in general?
Music,
okay.
A singer.
Got it.
Yep, he always knew he wanted to do that. As a matter of fact, he didn't really have a backup plan in his life. He knew he wanted to be
just
a
like
musician.
A lot of us, yeah.
He knew he wanted to be a famous musician in a national band from the age of, well, he first joined a band when he was 13 years old.
Okay. In Cleveland.
In Cleveland, yeah.
Okay.
And actually Parma Heights, which
Yep.
is a suburb of Cleveland.
I got you.
Yep.
Okay.
And he started out as a drummer.
Yep.
And
You want to name the band that he started in at 13? Do you
his
know
first
the name?
band was called the Cyclones.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
They were an all-instrumental band.
Well, being that he was 13, was he? What was the average age of the other band members?
They were all older than him.
Okay.
Not a lot older, but they were all older than him. He was the youngest guy. As a matter of fact, sometimes they had trouble playing out because they would get gigs at bars, and Ben was too young to get in there. So they had to sneak him in sometimes and get permission from his parents to let him go.
Well, how did they get him by the owners of these bars? I mean, the bouncers and stuff. I hear they got some pretty crazy bouncers down in Cleveland.
I didn't get into that much detail about how they actually did
Good
it.
question, but nevertheless, all right, that's fine. But he did it. He wanted it bad enough, and he made it happen.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
he started out as a drummer.
Yep.
And then he auditioned for a band called the Grasshoppers.
Okay.
And they were a big band in Cleveland at the time.
I see.
And the Grasshoppers ended up being the house band for a TV show based in Cleveland. It was kind of like the American Bandstand of Cleveland.
Not Drew Carey. Not the Drew Carey show. That's based in Cleveland too. The
Yeah.
Drew Carey show? Not the
No.
Okay, this
No.
was long before the Drew Carey show.
Yeah, the show was called Upbeat.
Okay.
And,
what kind of a show was it? Was it an entertainment show? Was it a sitcom?
Yeah, it was a music show.
Okay.
They would have individual national artists come on.
Kind of like community auditions here in Boston, except.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they would play their hits
Yep.
and lip sync them.
Okay.
But they would have house bands behind them.
Yeah.
Performing.
Okay.
And Ben's band, the Grasshoppers, was actually a house band for
Okay.
Upbeat for a while.
Yep.
So he was, 16 years old, and he was on a nationally syndicated television show.
Crazy.
So
That's awesome.
he was a star in Cleveland.
Wow.
Yeah,
Star
I
was
didn't know
big.
any of this until I started researching the book.
Well, that's why I ask you these questions, and I know that these are the things that people are going to want to know.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Okay. Well, what happened to his first band, the Cyclones? I mean, he sort of matriculated from that first band to the second band.
Yeah.
Or some guys like Joe Perry, for instance, they play with more than one band at a time. He played with Aerosmith and with Charlie Farron, but Ben moved on from one to the other.
Right. He
Okay.
played.
He went from 13 with the Cyclones to 16 with the Grasshoppers.
Right.
Okay.
And when he joined the Grasshoppers, like I said, they were on this syndicated television show.
Okay.
And at 17 years old,
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
he was followed around town by people everywhere he went.
Yeah, he was a good-looking guy, and I say that objectively.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, and
just real curious. He looked very. I got to tell you. I mean, I've been a fan of the Cars for 40 years, and I still watch their music videos at night. And he looked like, and I'm not putting down the other band members, but he did look like the most athletic one in the band. He looked really good. He was buffed really good.
Oh yeah.
And he looked like I mean, did you know if he worked out or anything? Did he take? I mean,
he always took care of himself, no
Did he?
doubt.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right.
A funny little story though.
Yep.
He wasn't allowed to play sports in school.
Why?
Because
Well, I ask these questions.
his parents were very protective, and they were afraid he was going to get hurt.
Okay.
So
Wow.
he stuck to music and didn't really get into sports, but he was very athletic. For
Yeah,
sure.
I can see that. Okay.
He was always considered, even his bandmates in the Cars considered him the rock star of the band.
Well, they were all rock stars. But all right, that's fine. But we don't want to go too far. We're talking about Ben. All right, so he tried to be athletic. His parents wouldn't let him play sports.
Mm-hmm.
But he made a great career of music. Okay, so 16, 17, he was with the Grasshoppers, and he was on the syndicated show Upbeat in Cleveland.
Right.
So what happened after that?
Well, Ben actually left school.
Never graduated high school?
He did not graduate from high school.
Okay.
He finished his sophomore year,
Wow.
and he decided that music was going to be his life. Like I mentioned before,
Right.
it was his only plan to
Right.
be a musician, and he wanted to leave school and become a professional musician at that time.
Gotcha.
And I know that would be kind of tough to do nowadays, but back then I don't think
Things
it was
were different, yeah.
it wasn't as crazy sounding as it might sound now, because his parents backed him and they let him leave school.
They let him leave school, but they wouldn't let him. Well, I guess they were more worried about his physical well-being than his than his education. That was
Well, they knew.
But he obviously, maybe they knew maybe they knew he had a great future in music too, and they obviously were right if that's the case.
They obviously recognized his talent.
Do you know if I know this is kind of unlikely? Neither of his parents are still with us, are they? I mean, he'd be 71. He would have turned 71 the other day.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Some people do live to a ripe old age now.
Yeah, his
But,
parents are no longer
no
with
longer
us.
with us. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he quit school.
Quit school.
And
Yep.
this is when he was with the Grasshoppers, and he decided to become a professional musician.
Let me figure out the timeline. He was born in 1947, so we're talking like this would have been like in the mid 60s. So okay.
Yep.
So what happened between the years when he did that and when he hooked up with Rick Ocasek and all that?
He actually he actually got drafted.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he got drafted in the Vietnam War. He didn't end up seeing combat because he eventually got out of the service as being a sole survivor of his family. He was the only male in his family.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
His dad was already gone.
Yep.
So it took about a year or so, but he did eventually get out of the service. And when he did, he ended up back in Cleveland, and he basically had to start all over again. Even though
what happened to all his bandmates from before he went into the service? I mean, they weren't around anymore to keep resume the band songs and whatever.
Some of his bandmates ended up going to college.
So that wasn't for him. So obviously
you don't get drafted when you go to college.
Yes, I remember that. I remember. It's funny. I'm just gonna throw in a little anecdote of my own. I hated school as a kid. Back in the '60s, when I was in first grade, I would watch the news with my parents and watch the Vietnam War unfold every night on the national news with Walter Cronkite usually. And somebody told me if you go to college, you won't have to go to war. I used to worry that I'd be old enough that I'd get drafted and get killed in Vietnam. But you know something? I hate the idea of having to go to college. Sounded almost as bad as getting killed in Vietnam. So I was really bent about that. But go on. I figured I'd just throw that in for effect.
Yeah.
A little all-time nostalgia to share with you, of my own. But go on.
Yep, he started in the Cyclones.
Yep.
I want to mention another band he was in between that and the Grasshoppers called the Delphis.
Okay, I've heard of that. Were they a national band at the time?
No.
Never. Okay,
no, they were a trio.
Yeah.
And they did polkas.
Okay.
They played wedding receptions and did a couple of bar gigs. But that only lasted a summer or so.
Okay.
Because those two guys were older than him, the other two band members, and they went to college.
Did Ben dance at all? I mean, was he did any polka dancing? Hey, you got to ask these questions.
No, I don't think he was a dancer.
He wasn't. Okay, maybe that's the reason it didn't
work out. He was a drummer
out.
in those two bands.
Just a drummer. Okay.
So after the Delphis is when the Grasshoppers came along, and
Okay.
when he auditioned for the Grasshoppers, he had started playing guitar by then.
Okay.
And he auditioned to be the guitar player.
Right.
For the Grasshoppers.
No vocals yet, though, right?
That's when he started singing too.
Okay.
So he kind of started doing guitar and doing some singing as he entered the Grasshopper phase.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. So, like I said, and in the Grasshoppers, all his bandmates were a lot older than him.
Right.
Like a couple of them were already married.
Okay.
With kids.
Yep.
And that band kind of broke up because the guys in the Grasshoppers, because they were older and already had families, they weren't necessarily looking to become professional musicians.
Okay.
It was like a great part-time job for them.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You'd get like $15 a gig,
right.
which is pretty good money back then.
Sure.
So they weren't really interested in becoming professional musicians. They had their jobs and their families, and they just did that as like a fun thing to do.
I see. Okay.
But Ben had different ideas.
Of course.
Obviously, he wanted to be a professional musician.
Okay. So this was after he got out of the service, right?
Well, the Grasshoppers was before the service.
Right. Okay. Grasshoppers.
Then he got drafted.
Yep.
He was in the service for a year or so.
And he wasn't and he didn't go overseas, or did he?
He did not go overseas.
He did not go to Vietnam. Okay.
No, he never had to do
I was lucky
combat.
He didn't. Yeah. Okay.
So when he finally got out of the service, he came back to Cleveland,
Yep.
and he had been out of, even though he had a big name in Cleveland when he went into the service,
right.
He was gone for over a year, and that's an eternity in music.
Oh, I
so
know.
when he came back to Cleveland, he basically had to establish
that's what
himself all over again.
Those guys weren't really around anymore because they had moved on probably too, the guys in his bands.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. They were in college, were in other bands.
Yep.
They had their families and stuff.
Exactly, okay.
So he basically had to start all over again.
Right.
And he kicked around a little bit, and it took him a while to get his feet planted again.
Yep.
And that's when he met Rick.
Ah, okay.
So
Was it 1976? around that time?
No. It was earlier than that.
It was, but it was in '76 that they formed the Cars. All right, let's get. Never mind the timeline as much. How did he meet Rick? Rick was a Boston guy.
Rick was originally from the Baltimore, Maryland area.
Okay, right.
And his dad worked for NASA.
Okay.
And they relocated to Columbus, I believe.
Okay, Columbus,
not in Cleveland, but outside of Cleveland.
Right.
And so that's how he ended up in that area.
I see.
And they ended up. There's a couple of different stories about how they actually met, but basically, they would run into each other at parties.
Okay.
And eventually they ended up at a party together, and they ended up in a basement in a house.
Yep.
And there were a
Started
couple
jamming.
of guitars around. They started jamming
Cool.
together. And Rick is quoted as saying that once he heard Ben's voice, he said it was the greatest voice he ever heard.
There you go.
And they were bandmates from then.
From
then on.
How did they end up in Boston eventually, though?
Well,
you have to ask that question.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
They traveled around a little bit.
Right. Because everybody knows the Cars as being from Boston.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. That's where they launched.
Right. I know. Yep.
But they kind of moved around a little bit.
Yep.
They had a band called Leatherwood.
Okay. Just the
And
two of them, or they had other guys too?
They had a couple other guys in the band too.
Okay.
And they went from different places. They were in Michigan for a while.
Okay.
And then they found a manager there, and then they decided to go to New York City because they figured that's the place to go if you want to get a record deal.
Yep.
They were in New York City for a while. They migrated to upstate New York for a while. Then that didn't work out. Then they went back to Michigan again. So they traveled around a bit.
Yep.
And then at one point, Rick wanted to go to Boston. He was interested in education,
Yep.
and he knew that Boston was a great college town.
Okay.
He wanted to be near Harvard.
Okay.
And he told Ben, "I'm going to Boston."
Cool.
Ben had just lost his father at the time.
Oh, boy.
This
Okay.
is the early 70s.
Yep.
So he wasn't quite sure if he wanted to leave Cleveland and his mom
Right.
to go to Boston. So Rick actually went to Boston on his own at first.
Yep.
And he was in Boston for several months.
Right.
But kept in touch with Ben, kept
Yep.
saying, "You got to come to Boston, you got to come to Boston." Once things settled down a little bit for his family, he knew his mom was doing okay.
Yep.
He went to Boston and met up with Rick, and that's how they ended up in Boston.
That's how they ended up in Boston. Okay.
Right.
So, and that's when they got those other guys, Elliot, David. Well, we don't want to go too far, but that's how just real quick, the other band members, how did he find them? They were all great cogs in that machine.
I mean, Boston's a great music city.
Exactly.
And it's not a huge city like New York City.
Right.
So a lot of musicians they interact, they know each other.
Right.
And without getting into too many details, they eventually they met Greg Hawkes.
Okay.
They met David Robinson. They met Elliot Easton.
Right.
They all just eventually came together
Yep.
and formed the Cars.
Formed
And
the
when
Cars.
they formed their band, they had a plan. They said, "Okay, we're going to have a record deal within a year."
Wow.
Within a year of forming, we are going to have a record deal. They started gigging all over the place,
Yep.
played any place they
They
could.
played at the Rat?
Oh yeah,
Did
that's
they?
where they really kind of launched.
That's what I figured, yeah.
Yeah, they were big at the Rat,
Yeah,
for sure.
okay, cool.
And sure enough, within a year, they had a record deal.
Bingo.
And off they went.
Yeah. Wow. And all right, now I'm going to talk about here's what happens. You know, as life goes on, you learn things day to day. Now I love my favorite song is My Best Friend's Girl. That's really a great song, and I watch it on my computer. Sadly, my cat just died, and she used to love that song. She
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, she'd jump up on the table and you know, I'd play the song and I'd pat her, and she'd jump up and down. Seriously, she loved that song.
Wow.
She loves music. My cat loved music.
That's
she was
great.
18 and she was a great cat. Well, but then I watched for the first time, and I never knew this until I saw the video. I watched "You're Just What I Needed," that video, and I didn't realize until that time that Ben was singing the lead vocals on that song, and while Rick was singing it on the other song. Well, I knew Rick was singing it on the other song. I didn't know Ben was singing it on until I saw it. Now, you mentioned that somehow the band designated certain lyrics for Rick and certain lyrics for Ben. How did they divvy that up? Can you explain that?
Yeah, they kind of have two different styles of
Right.
singing. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but Rick was more of a quirky kind of vocalist.
Oh, I get that.
And Ben was more of a
He was melodious
more of a
sounding guy.
crooner. You
Yes,
know what I mean?
he was a
Kinda-
crooner,
He
yeah.
had Elvis in him,
Really, he
that
did-
kind of thing.
Yep, no question.
But when Rick would write songs, he didn't really have particularly in mind who was going to sing that song. they would go into the studio and they'd start rehearsing, and
Yep.
Rick would say, "Okay, you try this one."
I'll get you.
And Ben would sing it, and Rick would sing it, and they would kind of go, "Yeah, that one's yours."
Oh, I got you.
So
what
when he
a
wrote
great, what a great system. That's
yeah,
really
he didn't
cool.
really designate it. Okay, I wrote this for you.
Right.
I wrote this for me. They kind of went in there and kind of both sang it and felt their way through it, and it just they could get the vibe and
Right,
figure out
right.
who should be singing what.
Yeah, because
so that's
some,
kind of how
some
they did
bands
it.
will have one lead singer throughout, and other bands will have more than one. And I always liked, like people in general, the more multifaceted, the more opportunities you're going to have.
Yeah.
But that's really cool how they did that.
It's really cool that they both sang a bunch of hits.
Okay, so
Yeah.
now let's fast forward a little bit further, toward like the '80s now. And Ben did that song "Stay the Night" in 1986, and I saw an interview with him on YouTube, and that was a great song. But when did his career ever? Did eventually the Cars break up and Ben went solo, or did that not happen? Or was he with the Cars till the end?
Well, Ben eventually had a solo band. When he did his solo album,
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily his plan. It was Rick's plan.
Okay.
Rick did several solo albums.
I see.
And he wanted to do those and planned them out. Ben didn't necessarily have in mind to do a solo album,
Okay.
but the record company approached him
Oh.
and said, "We want you to do this."
I see. Okay.
And he,
What record company? What label did they carry? They carry them.
Elektra.
Elektra. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they kind of approached him and said, "Do you want to do this?"
Okay.
He actually signed, I believe, a 3-album solo deal, although he never did 3.
Yeah.
He only did the 1.
Right.
So they approached him
Yeah.
about doing it, and he figured, why not? If you're going to give me the opportunity, I'm going to do it.
There you go.
So him and his fiance at the time.
Okay.
I'll also interject that Ben kind of not had trouble with, he was not very comfortable with writing lyrics.
Okay.
He loved the fact that Rick did lyrics.
Right.
He let Rick, that was Rick's thing.
Right.
So Ben was a great songwriter as far as writing melodies.
Okay.
I mean, he played drums, bass, guitar, multi-instrumental. But he felt a little uncomfortable about lyrics.
It's interesting. You got to write the music as well as the lyrics. And I guess Ben was more of the instrumental genius than the.
Exactly.
I got you. Okay.
And his fiance at the time
Yeah.
was also musical.
Right.
And they teamed up, and she helped him with lyrics, and they co-wrote songs together.
Cool.
So he did more of the melody stuff. She did most of the lyric stuff.
Okay.
And they married the two together.
Okay.
And that's how he created his solo album.
And that's "Stay the Night" was her lyrics, perhaps. Or just wondering.
Well, yeah.
cool.
Not that he wasn't involved in the lyric
Oh, of course he
writing.
was involved. He sang them and he killed it. He was great.
Oh, of course,
Okay,
of course. But I think she helped him a lot and made him feel more comfortable with,
Of course.
having a partner and having someone to help you along with
I
it.
wouldn't mind that in my life too. Then maybe I wouldn't mind having a female partner helping me out.
Yeah.
My guests help me when they're here, like yourself. But you know what I mean.
Exactly.
That's very inspirational.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of song that I would, if I had a girlfriend, that would probably be. There's a possibility that would be a candidate to be our song of
Right.
a bunch of other ones too that we would choose from.
Right.
All right, well,
so when he
yeah.
did his solo album, he was still in the Cars.
Okay.
The band hadn't
I
broke up yet.
understand. Okay.
So he did his solo album, but because the Cars were still recording and
Yep.
touring, he didn't do a solo tour or anything
Right.
like that.
He still toured with them.
Yeah,
Okay.
he just put that album out and continued to do stuff with the Cars.
Okay. All right. Well, now let's go for. We have to talk. It's up to you, but we have to talk about. If you want, I'm not going to say we have to. If you want to, eventually, then his demise and everything and how he fought it. I assume he was pretty rugged. I had no idea. Like I said, he passed on my birthday in 2000, Tuesday, October 3rd, 2000, which was my 41st birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's unfortunately part of life. You can elaborate on that if you want to. I'm just giving you the option.
Yeah.
We talked about it before we started, so it's up to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. It's known.
Yeah.
He passed away from pancreatic cancer.
Right.
And literally just a year after he was diagnosed.
Yep.
But I got to tell you, he was a tough cookie.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
After the Cars broke up, he was a hunter and a fisherman.
Okay.
He loved the outdoors.
Yeah.
So he eventually sold his house
Yep.
in the Boston area, and he moved to Vermont.
Right.
About an hour or so north of where I live.
Where you live, right.
And he lived in Vermont.
Yep.
So he was kind of out of the music scene, the spotlight,
Yep.
for a while. But he also started getting together with a couple other musicians and collaborating with them. And he actually did start writing songs that was going to be his second solo album.
Okay.
He never got a record deal. It never quite materialized.
Okay.
Those songs remain unreleased. But even though the Cars broke up, he never stopped
Okay.
being involved in music.
I see.
So he was in Vermont, he wrote some songs, and then he decided that he wanted to get back on the road.
Okay.
So he formed...
This was after we found out he was not well, was that?
Nope, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. So he formed his own solo band
Okay.
called Or.
Yep.
And he started touring.
Right, wow.
And he toured around for a couple of years doing live shows.
Yeah.
So he never stopped playing music.
I got you, okay.
And then he got a call one day from a famous musician, a couple of famous musicians, and they invited him down to Atlanta
Yep.
to join a band.
Okay.
Derek St. Holmes,
Yep.
who was a guitarist for Ted Nugent.
Right, oh wow, okay.
Jeff Carlisi, who was in a band called 38 Special.
Oh, it's
pretty big in the
Great
80s.
band. Yeah, I know. I love 38 Special.
Yep, and the drummer was Liberty DeVito, who was
Okay.
Billy Joel's drummer
There you go.
for years. And they contacted Ben and said, "We've always admired you and loved you as a singer and a bass player. What are you doing right now? You want to come join our band?"
Okay.
So Ben said, "Well, sure, I'll come down and check it out."
Okay.
So he still had his house in Vermont, but he started going down to Atlanta.
Okay.
He hooked up with these guys, and he joined this band that was called They called it Big People.
Okay, wow.
He was in Big People. They started doing shows.
Yeah.
They were warming up for Styx.
Yep.
Getting their feet wet,
Yeah.
getting their set list. So what they would do is, even though they didn't have any original material,
Yeah.
they would do a few Cars songs.
Okay.
They would do a few Billy Joel songs
Right,
because
okay.
Liberty's the drummer.
Yeah.
They would do a few Ted Nugent songs.
Okay.
They would do a few 38 Special songs. And they did that for a while. And they were on the verge of getting a record deal. They were starting to gain momentum,
Yeah.
picking up more shows.
Okay.
And that's when Ben was diagnosed.
Okay, I see. Well, you know what? This was a great interview, but we got 2 minutes left.
Okay.
Real quick, and I know what happened after that. Just real quick, what's your history as a writer yourself? Just sum it up in about 2 paragraphs, and then we'll wrap the show up.
I've been a published writer since 2000.
Music writer?
Mostly music journalism.
Okay.
I was also an editor at a weekly paper in Vermont.
Okay.
So I've been a published writer for 20 years.
Cool.
But all newspapers and magazines. This is my first
first book. Okay.
This is my first book.
Real quick, you want to give any shouts out to people that are going to see the show? Just condense it, and then we're going to no.
I want to give a shout out to all the Cars fans out there. I also want to give a special shout out to Donna Neal, who is my public relations director.
Couldn't happen without you, Don.
I wouldn't be sitting here without her.
You know it.
I wouldn't have a book deal without her. She has been tremendous in helping me. So Donna's been a very important part of all of this, and she's going to be coming back to Cleveland with me.
Maybe I'll go down
to launch
too.
the book. Hey, we're going to be inviting a lot of people. We'll make sure you get an invite.
At least.
You want to come to Cleveland, you can come with us.
Hello, Cleveland. And on that note, are you ready to jiggy with it? Great job.
I'm ready.
I hope you had a good time.
Oh, I had a great time.
All right, here we go, folks. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Topic Time. Watch more. Here we go. Have a nice week and see you next time. Or whenever. Here we go.
Shout out to Charlie Farron, too.
Charlie Farron.
Love you, Charlie.
Joe Perry on your birthday. Got to get you on the show. Steven Tyler, too, hopefully.